Hi guys, it's Pab Ganoush here from the Unnamed. Sorry for the video quality, my PC really isn't up to scratch and some of the footage was recorded in 30-second chunks, so it can get a bit choppy. Anyway, here's my burn and bleed build that I'll be using at release, and I hope you enjoy. I'm going to start off with the traits for the build. There's 10 in strength, which gives a much needed power boost, and great fortitude boosts your HP by about 500. It's not very much, but there's nothing I really thought was that decent in this trait, but I needed that extra power boost, otherwise it was going to be a pretty toothless build. The 30 in arms gives you a nice bit of crit chance and has one of the most important traits in this build, deep cuts. This essentially doubles your bleed damage, which for dual swords is invaluable. Blade Master is self-explanatory, boosting crit chance with swords, and finally on a relatively crit heavy build, Vigorous, where crits give an extra strike of adrenaline. Generally this isn't that important for a warrior in SPvP. You've got enough ways of generating adrenaline, but every little helps. 30 in tactics is the main focus of this build. Not only does it give you an extra 3k HP, it also gives you the Grandmaster trait Vigorous Shouts. With your shouts heal, lung capacity for the 20% reduced shout cooldown, and stronger bowstrings for a boost in longbow range from 900 to 1200. Next, I'm going to show you the utility skills I've gone from this build. For the heal skill, mending's a must for structured PvP. The ability to heal yourself and remove conditions on the shortest cooldown of all the heals is just incredibly good. Unless you're running a build with lots of sigils, there's really not much point in anything else. Next I went for Fear Me. I never used this until it got a buff in Better Weekend 3, always going for Throw Bolus, but despite the long cooldown it's very useful for point denial, which you'll see an example of later, and also heals you for over 1k with Vigorous Shouts trait. Shake It Off and For Great Justice have been chosen as they have the shortest cooldown, on 20 seconds with lung capacity trait. Both have useful abilities in combat and heal for over 1k each with the healing shouts, which stacks with compassion, so it's quite nice if you want to tweak this spec a little bit for a bit more survivability. You can boost your healing, and I think with about 800 healing, 900 healing, they go up to about 1.7k heals, so they're pretty decent. For the elite trait, I've gone for Signet of Rage here. The reason behind this is because I was running in hot join PvP. I wanted to boost my damage and be selfish. But in structured 5v5 the team, I'd always choose battle standard for the elite. The ability to get off a clutch mass revive, even on a long cooldown, and provide stability for your team is a huge bonus that can't really be turned down. Now over to the gear. The Rabid Amulet is almost perfect for what we want for this build. Lots of condition damage for the burns and bleeds, a good spike of crit chance, and most importantly a good chunk of toughness. I socketed it with the Soldier's Jewel, which is needed to boost power so you aren't toothless, and provide 750 HP and 75 toughness. For the weapon sigils, I originally had Sigil of Smouldering socketed in the Longbow, giving plus 10% to burning duration, but after some experimentation I settled on Sigil of Air, so try out Smouldering, but Air seems to give the better damage boost. For the swords, I've gone for Sigil of Blood on one, giving a 30% chance to steal life on crit. From testing it seems to steal about 400 HP, which is a decent, swing of 800 to you, and it also has no proc cooldown and therefore can trigger multiple times during the burst ability Flurry, which hits around 8 times. On the other I put Sigil of Air, which hits for 1.5k on crit with a 5-second cooldown and gives a nice boost of damage when you get close and personal with an opponent. A quick review of the stats shows 1200 power and about the same condition damage. It's pretty balanced. The general build is quite condition heavy with lots of bleeds and lots of burning, but your auto attack on Longbow and lots of your other attacks, they all need power, and if you rely just on condition damage you're gonna pretty much do no damage at all. The crit chance overall is 48%, which is 58% for the dual swords with the Blade Master trait, and 18% crit damage from the armor runes we'll see in a second. Armor is 2.8k overall, with about 1,600 of it being toughness. which when coupled with a health pool of just over 2.3k should be decent. I had kind of very little trouble staying alive in 1v1 and 1v2 when I tested it out. There's very little extra healing power, and as the Vigorous shouts scale with this, like I said earlier, you can always tweak the build to give you more survivability by boosting your healing power at the expense of some power or precision. The armour runes are all 6 in Divinity. This gives a nice boost across the board, and a build like this that wants to be effective in many areas is perfect. The extra crit damage doesn't hurt either. For any of you that were curious, that little orange guy on the guild tab is Ben the Unnamed Calamari. He's our guild mascot. If you want to get to know him a bit better and are interested in structured PvP or world versus world, then head over to the website and drop inspected application. The other link is to my blog. If you head over there, you can find more builds, theory crafting, videos from other players, and general warrior goodness. Links to both will be at the end of the video too. I'd also like to take this opportunity to quickly apologise for the sound quality. I've just realised that my fan sounds like a cat that's got stuck in a lawnmower, and if you didn't believe me earlier about how terrible my PC is, the sound of my fan working so hard to keep up with basic video editing software should be all the proof you needed. As I'm doing disclaimers, I should also mention that I'm a pretty average player, maybe even average to poor. The footage I've selected has been chosen to try and highlight the build and its uses. So if you find yourself playing like me, you're doing something wrong. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the gameplay part of the video. A lot of the footage was taken from a rushed Legend of the Faux-Fire Hot Join match, with a bit being taken from Battle of Kylo, and I think there may even be some forest thrown in there. I decided to make this video in the last half hour of the final stress test, so this isn't hours and hours of edited down footage, and it should give a pretty fair idea of what the build can do. This particular slice of footage doesn't show very much. It's just a gang of hot joiners running around messing people up, really. Apart from showing off the healing shouts and how useful they are just as standalone heals, even without taking into consideration their buffs, there isn't really much to it. First I thought I'd show you how good their gap closer Savage Leap can be. It's the sword ability number 2, and as you can see it takes the ranges linear, so you can jump from very high up and it still closes very decent gaps. Before this slice of footage cuts out, you should also be able to see a bit of how decent the build is at surviving multiple enemy attacks. I think I managed to get away at the end of this, but I can't actually remember. And as this is just an unregistered version of Fraps, it only lets me record in 30-second bunches. Continuing on with the survival theme, in this example I managed to hold my own pretty well against 3 attackers, an engineer, a necro and a warrior. I particularly like the double fear in the middle, and with better skill and a good team behind you, you'd be able to get help sent over and hopefully save the point with this build. As well as having decent survival, this build also provides point denial in the way of the direct AoE fear shout Fear Me, which also happens to heal, which is quite nice. I use it here during faux fire, and if it weren't for an unlucky block from a piece of wooden fencing, I would have managed to deny 3 opponents point access and possibly even neutralise the point. This might not seem like a lot, but for one player to neutralise a point and keep 3 opponents busy, in a 5v5 that would leave a 4-on-2 for the rest of my team to dominate the map for half a minute or so, or if you called for help, you might even be able to clear the 3 off a point. This build also has indirect point denial through 2 pretty powerful area attacks. The Longbow ability 3, Arcing Arrow, which takes its damage from power, and the AoE burst ability for Longbow, Combustive Shot, which inflicts burning and takes its damage from condition damage. The latter also has a massive area of effect and is really good for getting people off points. They either stand in the burn zone and take a lot of damage, or they get the hell out of dodge and risk me and my team neutralising the point. The examples in the video are taken in Sanctum, where the point has a far larger circle. On normal points, the AoE you see would usually fill it completely. Before I go on to some more gameplay, I thought I'd show some of the newer players some decent positions in Faux Fire and Forest where this build really excels. First is a spot in Forest at the Capture Point Keep. This is a good spot if you've been helping with Svarnir or the Chieftain. You can then continue up behind and rain down AoE fire on the keep point. The second spot is a similar one in Sanctum on the Faux Fire map. This is less secure as opponents can get to you up the stairs quite easily, so you need to watch your surroundings. However, the battle for the midpoint on Faux Fire is often the deciding fight, so being able to AoE here, as well as AoE heal your team, is very important. The final position is on Faux Fire as well, between Sanctum and Waterfall. You can see most of the big Sanctum area from here, and also Waterfall and the approach to it. I actually end up seeing a pair going to Waterfall, showing what a good vantage point it is for a roamer or a team captain to be able to call out movement from. First up is a 2 versus 1 against a Necro. Like all of my gameplay footage, it isn't meant to be me just ruffle stomping people, but instead it's meant to highlight parts of the build. This clip shows the manoeuvrability of the build and the constant nature of the damage. You'll see 100, 101, 102 ticking for the entirety of the fight, even when I swap to Longbow. This is the bleed damage, and although it stacks in intensity, not duration, you see that having it constantly up is pretty easy. The next clip is a group fight in Sanctum. It shows how useful Savage Leap is when covering ground on this big control point, and also the weapon rotation of Longbow, swords, Longbow that this build really excels with. The second part of this clip also shows the AoE heals of the shouts, which I've slowed down here, as well as a good example of the shout Fear Me being good for point denial. This gameplay is from Sanctum as well, possibly even from the same game, and demonstrates attacking from the good vantage point shown earlier in the video. The Longbow gets a decent number of crits here, and although at this point I still was testing out the Sigil of Burning on it, you'd expect one of those crits to proc the Sigil of Air. At the end I've slowed it down to demonstrate the AoE and the power if you nail it. You can see the hit for around 600 is the burn from the burst ability, and the 1.2k is from the Longbow number 3 ability. This is one of the only pieces of footage I have from Kylo, and despite it being 2-on-1 again, it demonstrates the versatility of this build. We engage a Necro on the gangway, I shoot an AoE onto the point through the window to assist my team inside, then swap to sword and stack a load of bleeds on the enemy. It fluctuates between 6 and 16 stacks, but seems to stay around 9 for most of the battle, even when the enemy removes a full stack of 10. I think this fight ended with me dropping Fear Me and doing a runner, to be honest, but it still shows how good the bleeds can be. The final piece of footage is from the very start of a Faux Fire hot join. I think it might have even been the final one I played in the stress test, where I've taken up the position on the vantage point over Sanctum. I'm not going to give a running commentary on this, but it shows how the build works overall and the synergy between survivability, sustained DPS and support before going into a 1v1 situation with a thief where the strength of bleeds and burning is shown as he dies whilst under stealth from them.
Is under attack! You lost the graveyard! For free! Can't breathe. Now we can fight for real.
Well, thanks for watching my first video on Guild Wars 2 and the Warrior class. I'll hopefully get some good team structured PvP videos out after launch for those that are interested too. I created and tested this build in a period of a few hours, and it was the first time I properly used a longbow. Once this build is learned and all the abilities I've got to grips with, I think it will be a very useful setup in both structured PvP and world versus world. If you're interested in finding out more, drop into the guild website where we have a number of build guides, or check out my blog for all your warrior based needs. This has been Papa Ganoush the Unnamed. I'll see you in game.